Officer Jason Keller had been with the Willow Ridge Police Department for 6 years when he responded to a trespassing call that would end his career, cost the town $4.3 million, and force his department to answer to the very person he'd just arrested. He was 31 years old, experienced enough to verify facts before making arrests, but apparently convinced that his assessment of who belonged in wealthy neighborhoods was more reliable than physical evidence. One Saturday afternoon in October, Keller received a call about a suspicious black woman entering a mansion on Meadowbrook Lane, the most exclusive street in Willow Ridge. The caller described her as possibly homeless or conducting surveillance. Keller arrived, saw a black woman in casual clothes standing at the back door of a colonial-style home worth $2.8 million, and decided he knew exactly what was happening. What he did next, ignoring her explanation, dismissing documentation, and arresting her on her own property, would become a case study in how bias overrides evidence. More importantly, it would force him to explain his actions to his new boss, the woman in handcuffs. A black woman in her early 50s, Dr. Michelle Bradford, stood at the back entrance of her new home, unpacking boxes from her car. Her house keys dangled from her hand. Moving blankets were visible in the driveway. No crime, no disturbance, no trespassing. Just a homeowner doing what millions of Americans do on moving day. But Officer Keller saw her through a lens so clouded by assumptions about who lives in $2 million homes that he couldn't imagine she was exactly where she belonged. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Meadowbrook Lane curves through the northern edge of Willow Ridge, Connecticut, a town of 18,000 residents located 35 miles from Hartford. It's old money, established wealth, colonial architecture mixed with modern additions. The kind of place where driveways are half the length of city blocks, where lawns are manicured weekly by professional services, where garage doors stay closed and security cameras monitor every entrance. Number 847, Meadowbrook Lane sits on 1.2 acres at the end of a cul-de-sac. A white colonial with black shutters, built in 1962 and renovated extensively in 2019. 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a 3-car garage, and a backyard that backs onto protected wetlands. Previous owner Linda Hartwick had lived there for 38 years before moving to assisted living. The house sat on the market for 6 months before Dr. Michelle Bradford made an offer that was accepted immediately. It was 2:47 p.m. on Saturday, October 14th. Temperature in the low 60s, clear skies, leaves beginning to turn. Perfect moving weather. Bradford's silver Lexus SUV sat in the driveway. Rear hatch open, boxes stacked inside. A U-Haul truck was scheduled to arrive at 4 p.m. with her furniture. She was using the quiet afternoon to start bringing in essentials. Kitchen supplies, bathroom items, clothes for the first week. The neighborhood was quiet. Most residents were inside or out for the afternoon. A few children rode bikes at the far end of the street. Someone was mowing their lawn 3 houses down. The kind of peaceful Saturday afternoon where nothing dramatic typically happens. Dr. Michelle Bradford had been in law enforcement for 27 years when she accepted the position as Willow Ridge's first black police commissioner. 27 years working her way through ranks that were designed to keep people who looked like her out. She'd started as a patrol officer in Newark, New Jersey at age 23, fresh out of Rutgers University with a degree in criminal justice. 5 years on patrol, working the toughest districts, proving herself to supervisors who doubted a woman could handle the job. Then detective, specializing in gang-related homicides. 8 years building cases that put away killers, when witnesses were too terrified to testify. She'd risen to sergeant, then lieutenant, overseeing major crimes investigations that required coordination across multiple jurisdictions. Her clearance rate was 73% in a division where 50% was considered excellent. She'd supervised teams of detectives who initially resented taking orders from a woman, but eventually requested assignment to her unit because she got results. At 38, Bradford enrolled in Rutgers' doctoral program in public administration while working full-time as a captain. 4 years later, she earned her Ph.D. with a dissertation on community policing models in demographically diverse urban areas. Her research had been cited in policy papers across the country. The International Association of Chiefs of Police awarded her their Research Innovation Award. Bradford had commanded precincts in Newark, served as deputy chief in Trenton, and spent 3 years as chief of police in New Brunswick before Willow Ridge's town council approached her. They were looking for someone with impeccable credentials, someone who could modernize their department, someone who could bridge the growing divide between police and the increasingly diverse community. Bradford checked every box. The town council voted unanimously to offer her the position. At 50 years old, Dr. Michelle Bradford was at the peak of her career, respected nationally, published extensively, and ready to lead a department that desperately needed reform. She'd negotiated a strong contract, $185,000 annual salary, full control over hiring and discipline, and a mandate to implement community policing strategies that actually worked. She'd closed on the house on Wednesday, October 11th. The closing took 90 minutes at a title company in downtown Willow Ridge. Her attorney, the seller's attorney, and a representative from Citizens Bank. Bradford signed dozens of documents, wired $560,000 from her savings and the proceeds from selling her New Brunswick condo, and received the keys. The deed was recorded with the town clerk that afternoon. Legal, documented, official. That Saturday, Bradford had spent the morning at the Willow Ridge Police Department, meeting with the outgoing commissioner and touring the facility. She'd start officially on Monday. She left the station at 1:30 p.m., stopped at Home Depot for cleaning supplies, then drove to her new house to start the move-in process. She arrived at 2:15 p.m. She wore jeans, a Rutgers sweatshirt, and running shoes. Moving clothes. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry except small gold earrings. She looked like what she was. A woman moving into her new house on a Saturday afternoon. She'd unlocked the back door, the one leading from the driveway into the mudroom, and started carrying boxes inside. Light items first. Kitchen towels, cleaning supplies, toiletries. She made 4 trips, stacking boxes in the kitchen and main hallway. On her 5th trip, she became aware of someone watching her. But to someone in that neighborhood, Dr. Michelle Bradford's presence was a problem, and that someone had decided to call the police. Jason Keller was 31 years old. He'd been a patrol officer with the Willow Ridge Police Department for 6 years, hired straight out of the Connecticut Police Academy after spending 2 years as a security guard at a mall in West Hartford. He was eager, ambitious, and convinced that his primary job was protecting Willow Ridge's affluent residents from outsiders who didn't belong. Keller had compiled a concerning record that should have triggered intervention long before it did. 9 complaints in 6 years. 9. 7 of them involved allegations of racial profiling or harassment of people of color in Willow Ridge's wealthier neighborhoods. 2 had been sustained, resulting in written reprimands and diversity training that Keller attended but clearly never internalized. The other 7 had been closed with insufficient evidence, though Internal Affairs noted a troubling pattern in several review memos. Keller had a specific approach to policing Willow Ridge's upscale areas. He believed that certain people simply didn't belong in certain neighborhoods, and his job was to find out why they were there. A Hispanic man delivering landscaping equipment to a house on Willow Ridge's east side. Keller detained him for 30 minutes, demanding to see multiple forms of identification and calling the homeowner to verify the delivery was legitimate. An Asian woman jogging through the country club neighborhood at 6 a.m. Keller followed her in his patrol car for 6 blocks before stopping her to ask where she lived. A black teenager walking home from a friend's house at 9 p.m. Keller questioned him aggressively about what he was doing in the neighborhood, implying the kid was casing houses. The pattern was documented. The complaints included witness statements. But Willow Ridge's police leadership treated each incident in isolation, never connecting them into the pattern they clearly formed. Keller's supervisors noted in performance reviews that he showed strong initiative, but needed to improve his community engagement skills. That was code. It meant he was stopping people based on their skin color. But his supervisors were willing to overlook it, as long as wealthy white residents felt protected. That Saturday afternoon, Keller was on patrol in Sector 3, which included Meadowbrook Lane and the surrounding estates. At 2:52 p.m., Dispatch called with a trespassing report. A concerned neighbor had called to report a suspicious black woman entering and exiting a house that was supposed to be vacant. The caller said the woman didn't look like she belonged in the neighborhood and might be homeless or preparing to burglarize the property. In Keller's mind, the narrative was clear. Trespasser, possibly planning a break-in, definitely doesn't belong. He didn't consider that the house might have been sold. He didn't think about the legitimate reasons someone might be entering a home with boxes and a car full of belongings. He just knew that a black woman in Meadowbrook Lane's wealthiest section was inherently suspicious. Keller arrived at 2:56 p.m., parking his patrol car on the street in front of 847 Meadowbrook. He walked up the long driveway, past Bradford's Lexus SUV, toward the back of the house where he could see her standing at the open door. His mind immediately filled in the details. Wrong demographic, wrong clothing, definitely doesn't live here. In Keller's mind, that was probable cause. He walked directly toward Bradford, hand resting on his service weapon. Do you think officers should be automatically removed from patrol after 7 complaints of racial profiling? Drop your answer below. Dr. Michelle Bradford was carrying a box marked Kitchen Essentials when she noticed a police cruiser pull up. She set the box down in the mudroom and walked back outside, expecting maybe a neighbor had questions about the moving truck or parking. Then she saw the officer's posture, tense, alert, hand near his weapon. Her stomach dropped. She knew exactly what this was. "Ma'am, I need to see some identification. You're on private property." Bradford kept her hands visible, her voice calm and professional. "This is my property. I just moved in." Keller's expression didn't change. The homeowner is out of town. Multiple neighbors have reported a suspicious person entering through the back. Bradford felt the familiar surge of frustration mixed with careful control. "I am the homeowner. I closed on this house 3 days ago." Keller stepped closer, his tone hardening. The seller was Linda Hartwick, an elderly white woman. "You're telling me you bought Linda Hartwick's house?" Bradford kept her voice measured, though her jaw was tight. "Yes, I purchased this property on Wednesday. Would you like to see the deed? It's inside with my closing documents." Keller's hand moved closer to his weapon. "I'd like to see you step away from the door, with your hands where I can see them." This is where bias becomes impenetrable. Officer Keller had responded to a call about a black woman at a mansion. When he arrived, he saw a black woman at a mansion. In his mind, that confirmed the complaint. Every piece of evidence after that, her calm explanation, the car full of boxes, the keys in her hand, was filtered through his initial assumption. He wasn't looking at a homeowner moving in. He was looking at a trespasser who was lying. Bradford pulled her wallet from her back pocket slowly, deliberately. "Officer, I'm telling you this is my house. I'm Dr. Michelle Bradford. I'm the new police commissioner for this town. I start on Monday." Keller's expression flickered, just for a second, but then hardened again. "I don't care if you're the mayor. Step away from the door, now." Bradford felt ice in her chest. She'd spent 27 years in law enforcement. She knew how these situations could escalate. She knew that compliance didn't guarantee safety, but resistance guaranteed danger. She stepped away from the door, hands raised at shoulder level. "Let me get my documentation. Everything is inside. Closing papers, deed, driver's license." Keller shook his head. "You stay right there. Don't move." A neighbor had come out onto her porch 3 houses down, an elderly white woman watching. Another neighbor, a man in his 60s, stood in his driveway. Bradford made eye contact with both of them. "Remember this," she thought. "Your witnesses." Keller keyed his radio. "Dispatch, show me at 847 Meadowbrook Lane with 1 individual. Need backup for a possible trespassing suspect." The neighbor on the porch called out, "Officer, is everything okay?" Keller didn't look at her. "Everything's fine, ma'am." "Police business." Bradford raised her voice, projecting toward the neighbors. "I am Dr. Michelle Bradford, the new Willow Ridge police commissioner. This is my house. I closed on it 3 days ago. This officer is detaining me on my own property." The man in the driveway pulled out his phone. Bradford saw him lift it, start recording. Keller's jaw clenched. You're going to stop resisting and put your hands behind your back. I'm not resisting. I'm explaining that you're making a mistake. My identification is inside. My closing documents are inside. Everything you need to verify my ownership is 20 feet away. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Bradford's breath came short and sharp. 27 years. 27 years of training officers, commanding precincts, testifying in court. And here she was, about to be arrested on her own property because a cop couldn't imagine a black woman owning a mansion. Am I under arrest? Keller pulled his handcuffs from his belt. You're being detained for investigation of trespassing. On what grounds? I've explained who I am. I've offered documentation. I'm standing on property I own. Turn around now or you'll be charged with resisting arrest. Should officers be required to examine documentation before making arrests for nonviolent property offenses? Let me know what you think. Bradford turned slowly. She knew resistance would give Keller exactly what he wanted. She kept her voice loud, clear, directed at the neighbors. I am complying under protest. I am Dr. Michelle Bradford. I am the incoming police commissioner. This officer is arresting me for standing on my own property. You are all witnesses. The woman on the porch was on her phone now. The man recording had moved closer, his camera phone angled directly at them. Keller grabbed Bradford's wrists roughly, yanking them behind her back. The handcuffs clicked shut, tight enough to bite into her skin. Bradford winced but said nothing. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Bradford's voice stayed controlled, almost clinical. Officer Keller, I can see your nameplate. I am the incoming police commissioner. I start work Monday morning. You are arresting your new boss on her own property without verifying evidence that is immediately available. This will have consequences. Keller's hand tightened on her arm. Yeah, sure, lady. A second patrol car pulled up. Officer Maria Santos got out, a 12-year veteran who'd worked with Bradford during the transition meetings. Santos saw Bradford in handcuffs and froze. Keller? What's going on? Keller didn't look at her. Trespassing suspect. Refused to provide ID. Claimed to own the property. Santos walked closer, her expression shifting to concern. Ma'am, are you Dr. Bradford? Santos. I'm Dr. Michelle Bradford, the new commissioner. This is my house. Santos's face went white. Her eyes shot to Keller, then back to Bradford, then to the car full of boxes, the open back door, the keys on the ground where Bradford had dropped them. Keller, that's the new commissioner. Keller's grip on Bradford's arm loosened slightly. What? That's Dr. Bradford. She starts Monday. She's our new boss. The neighborhood had gone still. 4 neighbors were outside now. 3 phones were recording. The moment was documented from multiple angles. Keller's face drained of color. You said you were the commissioner. I did say that. Multiple times. You decided I was lying. Captain Robert Hayes arrived 8 minutes later. He was a 24-year veteran of the Willow Ridge Police Department, the senior watch commander, and one of the few people in the department who'd pushed for Bradford's hiring. He pulled up in an unmarked SUV, took one look at the scene. Bradford in handcuffs, Keller pale and silent, Santos looking like she wanted to disappear, and understood immediately what had happened. Hayes walked directly to Bradford. Dr. Bradford, I apologize for this. Are you injured? Bradford's voice was cold, controlled, tight handcuffs, otherwise physically unharmed. But Captain Hayes, we're going to have a very detailed conversation about how this happened. Hayes turned to Keller. Uncuff her. Now. Keller fumbled with his keys, hands shaking. The handcuffs came off. Bradford rubbed her wrists. Deep red marks circled both, already beginning to bruise. Hayes picked up Bradford's keys from the ground and handed them to her. Dr. Bradford, would you like medical attention? No, but I want a full incident report. I want the 911 call recording. I want body camera footage from both officers. And I want Officer Keller in my office at 8:00 a.m. Monday morning. Hayes nodded. You'll have everything. He turned to Keller, his voice dropping to something sharp and final. Badge and service weapon. You're on administrative leave. effective immediately pending full investigation. Keller's hands shook as he removed his badge from his chest and his weapon from his holster. Captain, I was responding to a call. Multiple neighbors reported, "You arrested the incoming police commissioner for moving into her own house after she identified herself. Give me your badge." Keller handed them over. For the first time, he seemed to understand that his career had just ended on a driveway in Meadowbrook Lane. Hayes turned back to Bradford. "Dr. Bradford, again, I sincerely apologize on behalf of the department. This is inexcusable." Bradford's expression didn't soften. "Captain Hayes, I appreciate the apology. But we both know this isn't about one officer making one mistake. This is about a department that allowed an officer with 9 complaints to remain on patrol. This is about a system that treats people of color in expensive neighborhoods as inherently suspicious. And when I start on Monday, we're going to fix it." The neighbors were still watching, still recording. Bradford looked directly at the cameras. "My name is Dr. Michelle Bradford. I am the new police commissioner for Willow Ridge. What you just witnessed is exactly why I was hired. This department needs reform, and reform starts now. Should police departments face federal oversight after officers arrest their own leadership without cause? Drop your answer." Within 4 hours, the videos had spread across local news and social media. New police commissioner arrested while moving into her own home by the department she's about to lead. Willow Ridge cop handcuffs his future boss for entering her own house. Connecticut police commissioner detained on her property, and it was captured on video. The outrage was swift and intense. The Connecticut NAACP issued a statement demanding a federal investigation. The state attorney general announced a review of Willow Ridge's policing practices. Police reform organizations called it proof that no amount of credentials protects black people from racial profiling. Jason Keller's life unraveled within days. He was placed on administrative leave without pay. Pending investigation, the Willow Ridge Police Union initially defended him, claiming he was following protocol. But after reviewing the body camera footage showing Bradford identifying herself repeatedly, the union quietly withdrew support. Keller released a brief statement through his attorney. "I responded to a call as I'm trained to do. I regret that this situation escalated." That was all he said. It wasn't enough. The town council called an emergency session. Mayor Robert Whitmore, who'd led the search committee that hired Bradford, issued a formal apology. Dr. Bradford experienced exactly the kind of biased policing she was hired to eliminate. This incident is unacceptable and will be investigated thoroughly. But the real reckoning came when Bradford's attorneys reviewed Keller's file. 9 complaints in 6 years, 7 involving racial profiling allegations, multiple sustained complaints with minimal consequences. It painted a picture of a department that tolerated discrimination, as long as it targeted the right people. Dr. Michelle Bradford filed a federal civil rights lawsuit 6 weeks later. The defendants included Officer Jason Keller, Captain Robert Hayes for supervisory failure, the town of Willow Ridge, and the Willow Ridge Police Department. The claims were comprehensive: unlawful detention and arrest without probable cause. Bradford was on her own property, engaging in lawful activity with documentation readily available. Violation of Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure. Keller had no legitimate basis to detain or arrest Bradford. Racial profiling and discrimination under federal civil rights statutes. The evidence showed Keller responded to a call specifically because the subject was a black woman in a wealthy neighborhood. Excessive use of force. The handcuffs were unnecessarily tight, causing visible injury. Failure to train and supervise. The department knew Keller had a pattern of discriminatory policing and failed to remove him from duty. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Being arrested on your own property while neighbors record creates lasting psychological harm. The complaint included Keller's complete disciplinary record. 9 complaints, 7 involving people of color, 2 sustained with minimal consequences. All documented. All ignored by a department that valued keeping wealthy white residents comfortable over protecting civil rights. Willow Ridge's attorneys reviewed the evidence. Multiple videos from different angles. Bradford's clear identification, the closing documents proving ownership, Keller's documented history. Their conclusion was unanimous, indefensible. Settling was the only option that didn't guarantee a massive judgment and years of federal oversight. The town settled 14 months later. $4.3 million paid to Dr. Michelle Bradford. The settlement included additional terms: mandatory implicit bias training for all officers, quarterly review of all, stops and arrests for racial disparities, and creation of an independent civilian review board with real enforcement power. Officer Jason Keller was terminated 3 months after the incident. The termination letter was direct and comprehensive. Officer Keller violated department policy, civil rights law, and basic standards of professional conduct by arresting Dr. Michelle Bradford without probable cause after she identified herself repeatedly and offered documentation. Despite 9 prior complaints and multiple training interventions, Officer Keller continued to engage in discriminatory policing. His employment is terminated immediately and without appeal. Keller's name was entered into the National Decertification Index. His law enforcement career ended at age 31. He appealed through the police union. The union reviewed the body camera footage showing Bradford's repeated identification and documentation offers, then withdrew the appeal without comment. The neighbor who made the initial 911 call, Margaret Hendricks, and 68-year-old retired teacher, released a statement. "I made a terrible assumption based on race. I saw a black woman and assumed she was trespassing. I'm deeply ashamed, and I apologize to Dr. Bradford. But shame doesn't undo trauma. Apologies don't erase the video of Bradford in handcuffs on her own property." Dr. Michelle Bradford testified at a town council hearing 6 weeks after the incident. The room was packed with residents, reporters, civil rights organizations, and officers from her department. Bradford wore her commissioner's uniform, her badge visible, her bearing professional and commanding. "I am Dr. Michelle Bradford, Police Commissioner of Willow Ridge. I hold a Ph.D. in Public Administration from Rutgers University. I spent 27 years in law enforcement before accepting this position. I've commanded precincts, led major crimes investigations, and trained hundreds of officers in constitutional policing." She paused, letting the credentials settle. "On October 14th, I was moving into my home on Meadowbrook Lane. My home. The house I purchased legally, that I own legally, that I have every legal right to occupy. I was carrying boxes from my car when Officer Jason Keller arrived in response to a 911 call from a neighbor who saw a black woman and assumed I was trespassing. Her voice stayed level, but steel ran through every word. I identified myself immediately. I offered to show documentation. I explained clearly and calmly that I was the new police commissioner. Officer Keller's response was to handcuff me on my own property while my new neighbors recorded the incident. She looked directly at the council members. 9 complaints in 6 years, 7 involving allegations of racial profiling. And Officer Keller was still on patrol, still making the same assumptions, still treating people of color as inherently suspicious. That's not bad luck. That's not a series of misunderstandings. That's a pattern. Another pause. This department paid me to move here. You offered me $185,000 a year to reform a police force that clearly needed reforming. And before I could start work, one of your officers arrested me for the crime of being black in an expensive neighborhood. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so damaging." Her voice strengthened. "I accepted this job knowing it would be difficult. I accepted knowing I'd face resistance from officers who don't want change. But I didn't expect to be arrested by my own department before I even started work. I didn't expect to be handcuffed while neighbors watched and recorded. I didn't expect to have to prove I had a right to exist on property I own." She gestured toward the audience. "I'm settling with this town for $4.3 million. That's accountability. That's the price you pay when your officers violate civil rights. But money doesn't undo the trauma of being arrested for moving into your own house. Money doesn't erase the knowledge that even 27 years in law enforcement, even a Ph.D., even a commissioner's badge wasn't enough to prevent an officer from assuming I was a criminal." Dr. Bradford looked directly at the camera, recording the hearing for local access TV. "If this can happen to me, with all my credentials and authority, what happens to everyone else? What happens to black families who don't have Ph.D.s? What happens to people of color who can't afford attorneys? What happens to the teenager walking home, the man jogging, the woman checking her mail? If a police commissioner can be arrested on her own property, what protection does anyone else have? The room was absolutely silent. Should officers with documented patterns of discriminatory policing be automatically removed from duty? Let me know in the comments. This wasn't just about one Saturday afternoon. This wasn't just about one officer's terrible judgment. This was about a department that let Jason Keller accumulate 9 complaints over 6 years and never removed him from patrol. This was about a system that treated discriminatory policing as a training issue rather than a termination issue. Keller's record told the story his supervisors ignored. 9 complaints over 6 years, 7 involving people of color, multiple sustained complaints with minimal consequences, written reprimands, diversity training that clearly changed nothing, performance reviews that noted problems but recommended retention. The pattern was documented, extensive, impossible to miss. But Willow Ridge's police leadership treated each incident separately, never connecting them into the obvious pattern they formed. The department had multiple opportunities to intervene. After the 3rd complaint, after the 5th, after the first sustained finding. Instead, they sent Keller to training, filed the paperwork, and sent him back on patrol. They chose institutional comfort over community safety. They chose protecting an officer over protecting the rights of the people he was supposed to serve. Jason Keller's career is over. That's justice. The town of Willow Ridge paid $4.3 million. That's accountability. Keller will never work in law enforcement again. That's consequence. But money and terminations don't undo the trauma of being handcuffed on your own property. They don't restore the dignity of being treated as a criminal while your neighbors record. They don't erase the message that even a police commissioner isn't safe from racial profiling. The real question is, what changes now? Do departments finally remove officers after 3 complaints instead of 9? Do police unions finally stop defending officers with documented patterns of discrimination? Do 911 dispatchers finally ask callers why they believe someone is suspicious before sending armed officers? Do neighborhoods finally examine why they assume black people in expensive areas are criminals? Because if we don't fix the system that kept Keller on patrol despite 9 complaints, if we don't address the culture that taught Margaret Hendricks to call 911 when she saw a black woman moving boxes, then we're just waiting for the next Jason Keller, the next Dr. Bradford, the next arrest captured on video. Dr. Bradford is now leading the department that arrested her. She's implementing reforms, mandatory implicit bias training, quarterly analysis of stops and arrests for racial disparities, independent civilian oversight with real power. She's doing the work she was hired to do, but she had to be arrested first to prove why that work was necessary. Comment if you believe this should be law. Officers with 3 or more sustained complaints of discriminatory policing face automatic termination and entry into the National Decertification Index. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability starts with awareness, if you think police commissioners shouldn't be arrested for moving into their own homes, then hit that subscribe button. We're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding better. We're going to keep fighting for the commissioners, the professors, the doctors, the ordinary people who deserve to exist in public spaces without being criminalized. This isn't just about one small-town cop or one police commissioner. It's about all of us and the system we're willing to accept. Because when a woman with 27 years in law enforcement, a Ph.D., and a commissioner's badge can be arrested on her own property, the message is clear. No credential is enough. No achievement is sufficient. No amount of success protects you from bias backed by authority. And if we accept that, if we tolerate that, then we're all complicit in the next video, the next arrest, the next person handcuffed for the crime of existing while black.